Positively Perfect Problem Solving presents Order of Operations. Today's lesson is going to talk about order of operations and how to evaluate numerically expressions. So that's our goal. We need to talk about a few different pieces of language that we're going to be using throughout this semester. So let's talk about first about powers or exponents, because we use those a lot when we numerically simplify things. So an exponent or a power, you've used these plenty of times before, but basically is saying how many times, how many times to multiply. So what I mean by that, if I have the number 6 and I have an exponent of 3, that is saying that I want to multiply 6 3 times. We call the 3 the exponent or a power. Either word will work here. And we call the 6, let's make this green, and the 6 is called the base. Okay? So when we use these kinds of terms in class, that's how I kind of want you to talk about it. Okay, and we'll talk about that right here when I extend these expressions. So the first one says 8 to the third power. So when I look at 8 to the third power, that's what I want to say out loud. I want to say 8 to the third. But I can also say 8 cubed. When something is to the third power, we can use that phrase cubed. Okay? I don't want you to say 8 3. That is a big no. It is 8 to the third or 8 cubed. Extending a product, when I want you to extend a product, I've got 8 to the third here. Extending it is writing it out without using the exponent. So 8 to the third is really 8 times 8 times 8. I don't necessarily need you to give me that. I just want you to tell me that you understand the concept of an exponent. Okay. The next one, x squared. Do not say x2. Okay. It is x squared, or you can say x to the second power. Language is important. Do not come up to me and say x2. I'm going to make you correct that. Extended, x squared means you're just multiplying x by itself. X times x. That's what squared means. This last one, negative 2 to the fourth, this is a little tricky when we're dealing with negatives. Because the negative is on the inside of this parentheses, the extended product is negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. It is not negative 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. It's not this. Please don't make that mistake. Each 2 has its own negative in it. Okay? When I say this out loud, I'm going to say negative 2 to the fourth. Now, this may sound silly that I'm trying to teach you how to speak, but when we speak in math, it helps everyone understand. If you're not speaking it correctly, I can't understand you, your partners can't understand you. It is extremely important to use these phrases correctly. Okay? All right, so that's a little intro and reminder of exponents. Now let's talk about expressions and how we can plug things in to numerically evaluate them. So we've got a few things to think about with expressions and a few terms we need to be able to use. The first one is variable. A variable you've been using for a while, and a variable is a symbol for a number we don't know. Okay. We can use a number of variables, n's, x's, r's. It doesn't matter what the symbol is. There's something else really important with a variable. So here's a variable x, but sometimes variables also have things in front of them. Like I could put 2x. That number in front is called a coefficient. That's going to come up a lot. I'm going to ask you what coefficients are. So coefficient is that number in front of the variable. Okay. The other thing we need to know is what an expression is. Okay. An expression is numbers, symbols, and operations all grouped together. Okay. So numbers, symbols, operations, all grouped together. Okay, so if I give you something like this, let me just use the black. If I give you something like this, 4x minus 7 equals 5, then this right here, that is your expression, what I've put in yellow. Okay, it's not the 5. Well, 5 is also an expression. Technically, I mean, I don't want to get that complicated, but technically, oh, I don't know how I just did that. Let's undo that. I wanted to use a highlighter. So technically, 5 is also an expression. The equal sign is not. The equal sign is not part of the expression, but 4x minus 7 and 5 are expressions. Okay? They do not have an equal sign. So you can add that in there. There's no equal sign in an expression. If I were to look at this entire thing together, the 4x minus 7 equals 5, that entire thing is an equation. But separately on either side are both expressions. Okay. The last thing that we're going to do in this learning target is evaluate expression. So evaluate just means to calculate. Calculate value. I use a phrase called plug and chug. It's one that I learned in school. Evaluate is basically when you plug a number into something and then simplify and get a number out of it. That's what evaluate is. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples. And I'm going to draw a line here to kind of help us keep that straight. There we go. So evaluate each expression when x equals 2. Okay, now when we evaluate things, when we plug things in, we always use parentheses. I'm going to say this 10,000 times, and some of you still won't do it. You'll get the answer wrong, and I'm going to say you didn't use parentheses. Taught for 7 years, and this happens every year. So what I do, the n, parentheses with the variable, and then I'm going to plug in this 2 right here. See how I have the x equals 2? So this 2 is going to get plugged in for the n. Now I can simplify this. 2 minus 2 is going to give me 4. Okay? Because I can drop the parentheses here. There's no negatives. Here I've got 5n plus 4, so I'm going to write a 5. I'm going to change that n to a set of parentheses, and now I'm going to plug the 2 in. Okay, I'm plugging it in using parentheses, and now I'm going to simplify. 5 times 2 is 10. Bring down the 4. 10 plus 4 is 14. That's evaluating. We have to be really careful with negative values. Okay, same idea. I'm going to plug in parentheses for n. But now, instead of plugging in a positive 2, now it wants me to plug in a negative 2. So now I'm going to plug in negative 2. And now when I evaluate this, I've got negative 2 minus 2, which gives me a negative 4. I'm just now realizing I've made a mistake. And this is okay. I do this a lot. This is my bad. Here's my mistake. What is 2 minus 2? It is definitely not 4. It is absolutely 0. So see, even teachers make mistakes. Very easy to do. 2 minus 2 is 0, not 4. So fixed. Okay. All right. Let's go on to this next one down here. 5n plus 4 again. Make your parentheses for the variable, but now you're going to plug in negative 2. Now you can simplify. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Bring down your 4. Negative 10 plus 4 is 6. If you need to use your calculator for this, that's fine. That's why I have a calculator, right? I can turn my calculator on. I can get negative 10 plus 4, and I can type that in and get negative 6. Okay, so that is my final answer for this. Okay. So we know all of these basic things, terms and plugging in. Now we can go ahead and move on to order of operations. So order of operations, a lot of you use PEMDAS. I use something called GEMDAS because usually the P stands for parentheses. But to me, there are more types of grouping symbols than parentheses. So I like to call G grouping. So G stands for grouping. You want to do all of the grouping symbols first. That could mean brackets. It could mean parentheses. It could be a square root symbol, or it could be an absolute value symbol. It also means that if you have a fraction, if you have something that's a fraction, it also means that the top is a group and the bottom is a group, which is going to be extremely important as we go forward. The E then stands for exponents. So exponents are what you want to do first. Second. You do exponent second. Okay, so if you have something like 5 squared, okay, or negative 2 squared, that comes after grouping, something like that. You might have something like 5 minus 2 squared, and in this case, you would do the grouping first. If I can spell correctly. The grouping first, and then exponents. Okay. Now, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, it's very critical that you understand that you do these things left to right. So multiply and divide, you don't do the multiplication first, and then you don't do the division second. Say you have something like 10 divided by 5 plus 2 times 6. Even though GEMDAS has the M first and the D second, when I look at this, I'm not going to jump to the multiplication and say 10 times 5 plus 12. Okay? I'm not going to do that. Okay? Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the 10 times divided by 5 first, because it's in front, we read left to right. So this is going to be 2 plus 2 times 6. Then I'm going to do the 2 times 6 and get 12, then add it up, okay? It's always left to right, even if division is first. The same holds true for addition and subtraction. I've got two problems here that are identical, and if I don't read left to right, I'm going to get two different answers. So if I just decide to do all the addition first, so let's do that. I've got 10, negative 5 plus 4 gives me negative 1. Now I'll do the addition here, so that's a plus. So I've got 10 minus 1, and then negative 3 plus 6 gives me a positive 3. Now I'll do negative 1 plus 3 to give me positive 2, and I get 12 here. That's just me doing all the addition first. Okay, don't do this. Now we're going to read left to right and do it. Start with 10 minus 1. It gives me 9. Bring everything else down. Now do 9 plus 4 to get 13. Bring everything else down. Then left to right. 13 minus 3 is 10. And then 10 plus 6 is 16. Always read left to right. That is really important. Don't just do addition first because it's addition. Left to right is the proper way to go. Okay? The last thing we're going to talk about is evaluating using order of operations and simplifying using order of operations. So number one, and if you want to at the top of your paper, always write GMDAS. That might be helpful here. So the first thing I see here is a grouping symbol. So G, grouping. So I'm going to keep this 6 minus, but now I'm going to group 5 minus negative 6. 2 negatives become a positive, and that gives me 11. Once I have one thing inside the parentheses, I can just drop the parentheses. 6 minus 11, that is now our subtraction step. I'm going to get negative 5. And that is my answer. The second one, I see 2 grouping symbols, so I'm going to do both of them separately. This first one, negative 3 plus 5 becomes 2, and negative 1 minus 6 becomes negative 7. And again, if you want to use your calculator, you can, no problem. Now, 2 parentheses next to each other means multiply. So I'm going to do 2 times negative 7 to get negative 14. Okay? Those two are pretty simple. The next one is a fraction problem. Now, fraction problems can be a little tricky. Remember how I told you in fractions are really 2 groups? So this guy up here is one group, and this guy down here is a group. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to keep my fraction symbol, leave the negative 6 down there, and I'm going to go ahead and handle this top part here. So 10 minus 4 gives me a 6. And then bring down the 2, and this is a group up here. So now I've done one group. Now I got to do a second group. So 6 times 2 gives me 12. Bring down that negative 6. Now that my top and bottom have been simplified, now I can use just a simple fraction and get negative 2. So fractions are always little groups, every time. So this next example is the same idea. Draw your parentheses around each group, and we're going to solve the groups first. So bring down your 12, and now this bottom one is left to right, correct? So keep your group, and now do 3 plus 4. Bring everything else down, negative 1, negative 2. Keep doing your group. Bring down the 12, left to right now. 7 minus 1 is 8. Bring down that negative 2. We're still grouping here. Top is still 12. 8 minus 2 becomes 6. 12 divided by 6 gives me 2. Fractions and grouping are going to be your biggest struggle. You just have to remember that fractions mean group. Okay. We've got 2 more, and they're a little bit more complicated. So here again, I've got a fraction. So I always, whenever I see a fraction, I go ahead and write in my grouping symbols. So this is a group, and this is a little group. So I draw them in and go ahead and start doing the grouping. Now inside the group, I have this exponent here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the 3 times 25, and then add 5 squared is also 25. So this is still my group up top, and then I've got the 50 on the bottom. I've still got a group inside here. So within my group, I see I've got multiplication. So 3 times 25 is 75, and then bring the plus down. Keep those parentheses. I've still got a group. 75 plus 25 gives me 100 on top. Divided by 50 gives me an answer of 2. And do you see how nice and neat my work is? Do you see how it folds into a triangle? That is something we need to be doing. If I look at your work and it's kind of all over the place, that is a reason why students make mistakes. You have to keep your work neat, and we will help you with that. That is something we need to work on, because otherwise you're going to get these confused. Okay. Now this last one has 2 groups. It's got a group within a group. I can't do anything with this 8 yet, so I'm just going to bring it down. Okay, and I'm going to deal with this group inside here. Now, we work from the inside out when we have multiple groups. So the 20 can't do anything, bring it down. Keep the minus sign, and now we're going to deal with this group right here. 9 minus 5 is 4, so that's my first group. Okay, I'm going to bring this over a little bit. So boom, that one group is done. Sorry, that was my cell phone. Now we're going to deal with more grouping in here. We're going to deal with the exponents because that's within my group. Okay, so keep your grouping symbols, keep the 20, now do exponents because that is what comes next, is your exponent in the group. So 4 squared is going to be 16. You still got something in the group, so we can't do anything with the 8 yet. 20 minus 16 becomes 4. Brackets and parentheses are the same thing, really. Brackets just help you do groups within groups. So when I see an 8 next to a 4 that has a bracket, that does mean multiply here. So I'm going to multiply the 8 times 4 and get 32. Okay, these were all groups. Group, 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 and then the M. Okay, we did the exponents, so we got that taken care of inside. So once the group starts, then you can simplify the group. The group has its own set of GEMDAS within the group, okay? So that's order of operations, okay? The last 2 problems we're going to do are evaluating with order of operations. So all this means is that we are going to plug and chug. That's what evaluating really is. And I don't know if that's something that you've used. It's something that I used when I was your age, 17 years ago, which is terrifying, but I did it. So the first one, 6x squared minus 13. You have to use parentheses. I'm going to say this all year. If I look at your work and there's no parentheses, I'm going to send you back to try it again without any help. I'm going to do it because I've said it a million times. So I like to make what I call a shell. So I keep the 6, but I turn that x into a set of parentheses. Keep the squared symbol, keep the 13. I call this a shell. Okay, now I'm going to take that 11 that I know x is equal to and replace the x with 11. Now that I've created this new equation, now I can go ahead and solve it using order of operations. So here I see exponents first. So I'm going to do 6 times, now 11 squared is something you might want to put in your calculator. Okay, and to do that, we're going to turn the calculator on, hit 11, and then do you see this little x squared button? If you press it, it's going to put that little 2 up there for you as a shortcut. Hit enter, and I get 121. So it's going to be 6 times 121 minus 13. Now I'm going to do the multiplication 6 times 121. I shouldn't have done that because I need the calculator for that. I can't do that in my head. Maybe you guys can. But I'm going to use my calculator to do 121 times 6. I'm going to get a pretty big number, and that's okay. Don't freak out when you get big numbers. So this becomes 726 minus 13, and 726 minus 13 is going to give me 713. Big numbers are not a problem. Don't freak out with big numbers. It is okay. Okay, last problem. Okay, I'm going to make my shell. So I'm going to have, instead of an A, I'm going to have a set of parentheses, minus 21, make my division symbol, and then I see a second A. So there's 2 places I have to substitute. So I'm going to do my 5, make a set of parentheses for my shell, and then plus 9. Okay, now that my shells are made, now I'll use something other than red. Now I'm going to take the 3 and now plug that into my shell. And then this is what I'm going to be evaluating. Now remember, fractions have their own, I'm going to use brackets here to make it a little bit easier. Fractions have their own groups, one on top and one on the bottom. So we have to solve those a little bit separately. So what I'm going to do first inside my top group is I'm going to do the exponent. 3 to the 3rd power is 27. Oh, is 27. Okay, and again, you can double check that if you aren't sure. 27 minus 21 over, keep my bracket, over 5 times 3 is 15, and then plus 9. I did those both in one step, and that's okay. Now I'm going to do the subtraction on top. 27 minus 21 is 6, and 15 plus 9 is 24. Now, this is okay. Don't freak out. 6 divided by 24 is a fraction, but we need to simplify. We always have to simplify fractions, and like I told you in the last lesson, you can use your calculator for that. You can do 6 divided by 24 in your calculator. You'll get that decimal, but then remember, you can turn that into a fraction by hitting math, enter, enter, and it is 1/4. Okay? Always leave answers in fractions unless I tell you otherwise. Oops, AF is not a word. As fractions. Okay? Precision is important here. Okay? When you come up and check your answers and you get something wrong, it is vital that you go back and correct it. I noticed in the last couple learning targets, you're coming up, checking your answers, erasing, you're not really understanding why, and then you get to mastery and you're making mistakes, and that's unacceptable. Your tests are worth a lot of points. So it is okay to take time in class. That's what we have time for, to get the answers correct and know why, especially because there's multiple adults in the room who can help. So we need to be proactive, okay? Good luck on your practice, and always remember there is a question at the end.